Hello again, everybody, and welcome to a new edition of CaneSport's Countdown to Kickoff as the Miami Hurricanes get ready to host their longtime friend and foe, the Florida State Seminoles, in a 7 o'clock game on Saturday night at Hard Rock Stadium. And we're joined today by Ira Schoffel of WarChant.com, who's going to give us a lot of insight into this Florida State team that is the biggest mystery in college football. They came into the season as a top 10 choice, off of a 12-0 undefeated season of a year ago, and have just been horrendous, to put it bluntly. I mean, one of the worst teams in college football. They're 1-6. They easily could be 0-7, and now they're coming down to play the high-flying Miami Hurricanes, who are really, really feeling good about themselves, with Cam Ward obviously in the middle of the Heisman race, and Miami ranked number 5 in the country in the coaches poll. Ira, Miami and Florida State, they've kind of exchanged identities over the last year. Obviously, Florida State with the great season last year, Miami having one this year. Just give a synopsis. What the hell has happened in Tallahassee?
So, first of all, you said they could be 0-7, and that's true. But if the glass half full, they could be like 3-4. Like if a few things go their way, they could be a 3-4 football team. It's just been awful. They started off in the game in Ireland, and they did not play well in that game. And but at the time, I thought, listen, you're playing halfway across the world. It's a week 0 game. Weird things happen in games like that. It was DJ Uyungale's first game in this offense. Mike Norvell's first game with him. Alex Atkins, the offensive line coach, was suspended, couldn't be on the field. There was just a lot of weird stuff. And you kind of thought, okay, let's see what it looks like in the next couple of weeks. And then they come home and get beat pretty handily by Boston College. They lose home to Memphis. And then you realize, okay, there's a lot more going on here than just a bad day. So they really haven't been able to kind of break out of that tailspin. As you mentioned, they did have the win against Cal, and the defense played well in that game. And really, for the last month or so, I think the defense has played okay. It's not been great, but they've played well enough that they could win some of these games. Other than, the SMU game got away late. They had a bunch of turnovers, and I think the defense kind of checked out at that point. But for the most part, defense has given them a decent effort, but the offense has been so bad. It's the worst offense in college football, and it's just crazy to be playing Miami because you look at all these statistics, and Miami's at the top of the country, like all of these statistics offensively, and Florida State's at the bottom of the country in all these, from third down conversions to, passing to, really everything across the board. So, it's amazing what could happen in 1 year. Matt, I know, was on one of our other shows and just talking about how it's just maybe it's a sign of what college football is now, but these two programs have completely gone in 180 different degrees.
132nd in the country on offense, in total offense, 132nd in scoring offense. The defense is number 75 in the country in total defense, 77th in scoring defense. Yet you mentioned that they could be 3-4 had they gotten a few breaks along the way. And we can be certain that that's what the Miami coaches are preaching to their players this week. The biggest worry in the Miami camp is do not take Florida State for granted. They still have good athletes in that program. They're still capable of putting a game plan together. They beat Cal, which had a 25-point lead on you guys. So for the Florida State fan that's looking for hope, that's where it is. Would you agree with that premise?
Yeah, no, I definitely think so. And and also you look at last year's game. I think going into that game last year, Florida State, I think, was favored by 14. I think most people thought, Miami's quarterback situation with a freshman coming in to start at Doak Campbell Stadium, that surely this is going to be a rout. And it wasn't. Miami, really put a scare in Florida State and, could have knocked them off there at the end and ruined their dream season. So, I agree with the premise that, with rivalry games, you never take anything for granted. Plus, like you said, and Florida State does have some talented football players. They just haven't put it together. And if you're Miami's coaches, you don't want that to be this week. At the same time, I don't think a lot of Florida State fans are putting a lot of hope into this game, just because even if the defense plays great, even if Cam Ward makes a couple big mistakes, turnovers or just freak things happen, weird things happen. And you get a couple of bounces your way. The problem is, FSU's offense has been so anemic that it doesn't feel like they could ever generate enough offense to where, Cam Ward and this Miami offense could make it up in about 4 plays. And so, I think that's the problem. It would be one thing if Miami's offense was just a good offense. Then you feel like, okay, if a few things go your way, I think the reason a lot of FSU fans don't really have any hope going into this game is you just don't feel like you could stop that Miami offense for 60 minutes. And this offense doesn't do enough to really put pressure on another team.
Yeah, they have it all going on offense, no doubt about it. And the biggest reason is because they hit on their transfer quarterback. Cam Ward has been everything to this program. You see how good he is now, and you think to yourself, what in the world was going on over at Washington State? He's out there in anonymity playing games at 10:30 East Coast time. Nobody really, they may, even if they heard of the name Cam Ward, they certainly hadn't watched him much. And, yet there he was in the transfer portal, and he was there because he couldn't go to the National Football League yet because he didn't have the resume coming out of Washington State to go into the NFL. And it has just been the perfect fit here in Miami for him with the offense, the supporting cast that he has around him, which was kind of blossoming to this degree. I don't know that they would have been even close to this without him, but it at least was a ready supporting cast at receiver, tight end, running backs, offensive line, where you could bring this one player in who clearly was more elite than anybody even imagined and create what arguably is the best offense in the country right now. Florida State, the flip side. I won't put you on the limb. I'll say it. They picked the wrong guy.
I don't know. Yeah, I can't argue that. The only thing I would put
for another half a season. So
I don't disagree with that. It was a bad fit. I've said that. I think Mike Norvell, when he signed DJ, I think he had this vision that he was going to have this great running game, and that DJ would be kind of a game manager who could hit some big plays from here and there. But no, I don't. It clearly was a bad fit, and Mike Norvell clearly misevaluated what he had on the offensive line. The only thing I was pushing back on is there's been a perception from some FSU fans that like Mike Norvell picked DJ over Cam Ward, or that he didn't put enough effort into getting Cam Ward. He couldn't get Cam Ward. If he could have,
correct,
he probably would have. So
100%. That's a bunch of nonsense. Yeah. Cam Ward was either coming to Miami or he's going to the NFL. He really wanted to go to the NFL. Just couldn't yet. Now he might be a top 10 NFL draft pick in April. We'll see what happens. It's just amazing how much he's elevated his stock at Miami now in the transfer portal, which quite honestly from Miami could have benefits for years to come in recruiting guys out of the portal. Like, hey, look what we did for Cam Ward. So this is a great launching pad for Miami with quarterbacks around the country. There's no doubt about it. But DJ has turned out to be a horrible fit. And he's on his 3rd team, which is never a good sign. Went from Clemson. They kind of soured on him at Clemson and went out to Oregon State, did okay. And now he's back in the portal yet again. And Florida State reached quite, I'll be quite open about it from my opinion. They reached, the number I heard was $800,000. They paid him a lot of money to come to Tallahassee. And he came in and from what people have told me, he didn't exactly integrate himself with his teammates into the program, which has been the opposite of what Cam Ward's done at Miami. And, kind of got himself a place to live away from campus, feeling all, high on himself, obviously, for getting the big NIL deal. And it just has been a problem from the beginning, from what I've seen and heard out of Tallahassee. And now they got a mess on their hands because they had to bench him, Ira. So now you got this NIL guy that you're paying all kinds of money to, and you had to bench him here in the middle of the season. What's that been like up there?
Well, I would just, God, reframe a couple things. First of all, the part about him not fitting in with the team, he's engaged. I would understand him not wanting to live with other players. He's got his fiance here in town. And the other part of it is, I think the only thing that really matters at the end of the day is if you're good or not. Chris Weinke how old was Chris Winkie when he came back to Tallahassee?
Correct,
He was not
right.
hanging out. He was not hanging out with the other freshmen and sophomores at Florida
Yeah,
State.
if you're playing well, nobody cares where
Nobody
you're living,
cares.
what you're doing, right?
So it's a combination of, he probably didn't fit in, and then he was not playing well. And, look, I mean, I put a lot of that on the coaching staff. They're the ones that brought him in, and they didn't figure out a way to use him in the offense to where he felt comfortable. I mean, I just don't feel like at any point in these first 6 or 7 games where there was something that he felt comfortable doing. Now, maybe that's just who he is, but Washington State found something. Like he was much more productive at Washington State. He hit on some big plays. He didn't turn the ball over much. Really, the last 2 years, his last year at Clemson was not bad statistically, and his 1 year at Washington State was not bad statistically. This year was much like his first year as a starter at Clemson, where he just completely regressed and lost all his confidence. But on that point, if you're talking about the differences between the two quarterbacks and how it's worked out, I think this is a great example of when you have a quarterback that's really good and makes plays and makes everybody else around him confident, and they've raised their level of play. I mean, I've always loved Restrepo as a player, but it feels like he's gone to a different level. The tight end's gone to a different level. I mean, all these guys are making plays because they feel like they've got the baddest guy in town at quarterback.
Yes.
And the exact opposite with DJ. DJ did not exude confidence. He didn't feel comfortable. He was not playing well. And I feel like everybody kind of fed off that the wrong way. And so, I mean, DJ also, he got hurt. So I imagine he won't play another snap for Florida State. I think it's going to be Brock Glenn and Luke Kromenhoek the rest of the way, with those two guys kind of figuring out, and the coaches figuring out, who maybe, whether one of those guys is the answer in 2025.
Yeah, and that's been problematic too. I mean, Brock Glenn, he's had some decent moments, I guess. I mean, he's hit 50% of his passes in 3 games, 2 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Against Duke last week, he was 9 of 19 for a relatively anemic 109 yards. Then they brought in Luke Kromenhoek, who was 3 of 7 for 19 yards. Not a lot of inspirational play going on at the quarterback position for Florida State, which, listen, I mean, they're finding out now they don't have their future quarterback in the program. And I think that you'll probably see some pretty seismic change at that spot going into next year, at least from the appearances, right?
Mario's got to hope you're not the one giving them the speech about how they got to take Florida State seriously. I mean, I don't know that you can judge Luke. I'm not sure you can judge Brock Glenn yet, but you definitely can't judge Luke. Luke Kromenhoek's a true freshman that got in for 7, he threw 7 passes in a game where he's standing on the sideline, not even sure if he's going to play. Brock Glenn turns the ball over on 3 consecutive plays, 2 picks and a fumble, all by the quarterback. So they pull him and they put Luke Kromenhoek in, his first time playing college football, on the road against a pretty good Duke defense. So I'm not going to judge him based on, in order to say that, okay, this guy can't be the guy. He was a 5-star recruit coming to high school. I think he's got a lot of hand and arm talent. He's a big, strong kid. I think he may be the answer. The problem for them is they've been so bad on the offensive line, and the receivers are not playing well. So, it's hard to judge these quarterbacks based on that. So to me, the number one, they need to not ruin these quarterbacks in these next few games, not let them get beat to a pulp. They took 6 sacks against Duke. I'm sure Miami's going to bring a ton of pressure, and, have them at least try to grow from this. And then I think the biggest changes are going to need to be on the offensive line. I think if they can get, it's hard to get guys in the portal on the offensive line, but whatever they've got to do, whatever NIL budget they have, I really feel like needs to go there, because the offensive line's been, to me, the biggest problem with this offense.
All right, I'll go a little lighter on the quarterbacks with your guidance. And Miami players, if you're watching, turn off right now, because I'm being a little bit, a little bit heavy on these Florida State Seminoles. But I'll tell you why, Ira. I mean, I've turned them on a few times this year, and I've just been stunned. I mean, I'm like, how can Florida State possibly be this bad after being an undefeated team a year ago, and they got screwed at the end of the year? No argument. But, man, like, how do they go? I mean, the level of roster management nightmares. Ryan Bartow, please don't get mad at me. I've known you for a long time. But the roster management had to be terrible to go from a 12-0 undefeated team to a team that's struggling to this degree. And I was just shocked at what I was watching. And, quarterbacks aside, I mean, the run game, they're averaging 2.5 yards a carry. Lawrence Toafila, he's run for 253 yards on 64 attempts. They got a decent game actually last week out of Cam Davis, but 2.5 yards a carry now with an inexperienced quarterback situation, Ira. That's why they're at the bottom of the stats on offense.
Yeah, and the receivers are not very good either. So yeah, no, it's been a complete disaster. To me, again, the root of it goes back to the offensive line. I think Mike Norvell, they brought back basically 3 starters on the offensive line. You bring back Maurice Smith, who started for basically 4 years now at center, and then you brought back your 2 tackles, Darius Washington at left tackle and Jeremiah Byers at right tackle, and Darius Washington was first team All ACC last year, at least on paper. So that's what they thought. You've got a really good, an elite left tackle, a veteran center, a veteran senior at right tackle. They went into the portal to get some guard help, and it just didn't work. I mean, they got Richie Leonard out of Florida. He looked okay early on, but then he got an injury and he's out for the year. Then they also got a guy from TJ Ferguson from Alabama as a guard who never really played at Alabama, didn't play much. He has not panned out at all. A year before that, they brought in a guard from Auburn, Keandre Jones. He has not really panned out. And then they brought in a guy from Harvard, another interior offensive lineman, Jacob Rizzi, and he hasn't panned out. So now they're playing a redshirt freshman at one guard, Andre Otto, and they're playing a redshirt sophomore who had just moved to guard from tackle, Jalen Early. So you're basically playing 2 guys at guard that have only played a couple games at that position, and they're young and they're inexperienced. And so if those guys are the answer at those positions going into next year, well, now you still got to figure out new tackles because those are seniors and a new center. So offensive line, to me, it all goes back to the offensive line, and that's where Mike Norvell and Alex Atkins, who's the offensive line coach and offensive coordinator, I think that's where the biggest misses have been. At quarterback, if you have a running game, you wouldn't have so much pressure on the quarterback, but they cannot run block at all. I mean, there are teams that, when they played in Memphis, they couldn't run the ball at all. And then a week later, Navy runs for 300 yards or whatever against them. I mean, they have not run the ball well, really against anybody until last week. They showed a little bit of life against Duke with these young guys. So that to me has been the biggest problem. I do think they've got some young talent at wide receiver. And you may see some of those guys, a couple of South Florida guys. Luane McCoy is one of them. They also have a couple other young receivers that Amari Williams from Palm Beach County at tight end. They've got some young talent that I think you might see. But the biggest problem is just they haven't been able to block anybody.
Yeah, I mean, 20 sacks, 49 tackles for loss in the 7 games thus far is not a great statement for the offensive line. And, the lack of talent at receiver or established talent at receiver shined brightly for me when I watched Florida State. I was kind of surprised because, we know Ron Dugan's pretty well down here. He spent a few years at Miami. He's a very good wide receiver coach. But, I thought I was watching like a lack of toughness, kind of short arming footballs, all the things that a receiver doesn't want to be and do.
But that's where I kind of go back to what I was saying, though. Like if your quarterback is a stud, I feel like guys kind of raise their level of play. And when your quarterback's not a stud, I feel like a lot now great players will. Great players will. It doesn't matter. They're going to help lift the quarterback up, but they don't have that kind of talent at receiver, and they don't block well on the edges. I mean, the receiver position's been really a disaster too. I mean, it's been there's nothing that offensively that they've done that you could say, okay, at least you can build around this. And that's why I didn't feel like it was fair to put all the blame on DJ, because everything else was bad too. And now you're seeing that DJ didn't play. He hasn't played the last couple of games, and they still can't move the ball on offense.
Now, defensively, things are better than they've been on offense, but certainly not what Florida State was expecting coming into the year. Teams have been averaging about 4.3 yards a carry in the run game, a couple hundred yards a game in the passing game. They only have 2 interceptions on the season, have given up 9 touchdown passes. Give us a synopsis of where Florida State is on defense.
Yeah, that side of the ball was kind of early in the year. There was a lot of consternation about that side of the ball because the Georgia Tech game, they could not get off the field. Boston College game, they really couldn't. I mean, just first couple of 2 or 3 games, the defense couldn't get off the field. Part of it was some of these transfers they brought on that side of the ball that were high profile transfers. Marvin Jones Jr. was a 5-star recruit. Earl Little was a big time recruit out of South Florida that transferred in from Alabama. They brought in several transfers from SEC type schools, and you're thinking, okay, that's how you replace. Can Marvin Jones Jr. replace Jared Verse? Well, now that seems comical. I mean, it's just so completely different. But that's kind of what you were hoping at the time. You brought back experienced defensive tackles. They started off the year not very well, but they've gotten better. And then a couple of these other transfers they brought in just have not panned out. Like brought in a couple of transfers from Alabama on defense that have not panned out. And so you knew you lost 7 starters to the NFL, so that's a big hit. But because of the transfer portal, I think a lot of people thought FSU would just reload that way, and it hasn't happened. So now a lot of those guys are not even playing. Marvin Jones Jr. still plays, and he has some plays here or there, but the drop off from he's still in his defense, he's still a young guy. I think he's about 20 years old. When they brought Jared Verse in, and he was a grown man who had played a few years of college football before he got to Florida State. So, we'll see where those guys go. But yeah, it's the defense has not been. Again, we're all looking relatively compared to the offense. The defense has been solid, not good, but solid. But the problem is they don't ever make any plays to get the ball back for the offense. They don't, as you said, they don't create turnovers. They'll make some plays. They'll make some plays behind the line of scrimmage here and there. But they don't create takeaways, and this offense desperately needs some short fields. And so the offense is not good, and then they also never get short fields because the defense never takes the ball away, and they're always in bad field position. So it's really been a perfect storm.
And now, of course, they got to defend what right now is the top offense in the country, and Miami's getting its running game going too. So from the Miami standpoint, it's keep guys focused, continue building on what you've been doing. From the Florida State standpoint, it's rally the troops, obviously, for this game. I mean, and it's still Miami, Florida State. I got to think that there will be a lot of emotion, a lot of enthusiasm. It's a chance for Florida State to do something that can kind of put, a cherry on top of what they've gone through here in the early part of the season, I would think. Yeah,
no, I mean, that's totally the view. You go through these stages of a bad football season where early on it's like, Florida State was number 10 in the country preseason. People picked them to win the ACC, and you got all these high goals. And then a couple weeks in, you realize, okay, well, that's not going to happen. And then it's like, okay, well, if somehow you win out, you can maybe still get into the playoff or compete for an ACC title. Then you lose a couple more games. It's like, okay, well, maybe you can get to a bowl game and play well in the second half of the season. When you're 1-6, I mean, that's pretty much off the table as well. So now it's just, can you at least ruin your rival seasons? And obviously Florida's season's not going very well, and they're going to have a really tough stretch here before they play Florida State. But Miami, man, if they could do, maybe the unthinkable, that is going to be the motivation in this game, is to try to ruin Florida State season. And all these, the big three have done that to each other through the years. There have been years where Florida maybe could have played for the national title, and Miami or Florida State knocked them off, or Florida State could have. Miami did it multiple times. And Florida State's done it to Florida. So, there are those there's some of that in the history. But I don't know if any of them looked at as lopsided as this on paper. And so, but that'll definitely be the rallying cry. And, and Adam Fuller, FSU's defensive coordinator, when we spoke to him earlier this week, he sounded pretty confident about what he thinks they can do against this offense. Curious to see what that looks like.
I can't wait to see what that looks like.
I don't know if he means like try to hold them under 30 or what. We'll see. But but that's the coaches have to do that. The coaches have to try to give this team something to kind of believe in. And
they're going to have to force turnovers. If they don't force turnovers, it's not going to be a close game. I don't think, I don't think there's any question about that. All right. The one thing I haven't mentioned to you before we go is Mike Norvell. This is year 5 at Florida State, correct? Okay. So he's had a few bad ones in here, Ira. He had the one great year last year, a decent year the year before that. The other three have not gone so great. How much support does Mike Norvell have with the power structure at FSU and in Tallahassee?
Well, I mean, the power structure doesn't have a whole lot of, room to worry about whether or not they're supporting him, because I mean, they would, if they wanted to make a change, which I don't think they would, after 1 year after going 13-0, I mean, it would cost $65-70 million or whatever. Yeah, so that's not going to change. But in terms of, people's belief in Mike Norvell, it's been a roller coaster. The first year and a half, first year, 2 years, I think most people were like, this isn't going to work out. Then when they started to turn things around in the middle of that third season, and they ended up going 10-3, then at that point people are like, oh, wait a minute, okay, maybe it was all because he came in during COVID, and he had to deal with all of that first year, and then the second year, still turning over the roster, and then when you kind of have that strong third season, I think people start feeling good about it. Then you go 13-0, and man, people were all in. I mean, go back to last January when Nick Saban retired, and we were told by many people that Alabama was at least talking to Mike Norvell. They would have, FSU's fan base was all about Mike Norvell, and they would have gone crazy if the administration lost Mike Norvell at that point.
Yeah.
But now, now people are doing exactly what you just talked about and saying, well, wait a minute now. Look at the whole 5 years, and you had 2 terrible years. Now you've had this terrible year. And so now it looks completely different. There are some fans who are, who are going to ride the wave. If you're up, they're going to support you. If you're down, they're going to pile on you. I think there's some fans who believe in him, but want to see him make some major changes, make some changes on his coaching staff, maybe player evaluation, how they handle the transfer portal, whatever it is, and turn it around. But yeah, I mean, he's lost a lot of it. It's Jimbo Fisher one time. We were talking about, this was just he and I talking about, whether or not fans like you and whether people in the administration like you. And he said, well, if you're 12-0, it doesn't matter if they like you or not. You can do whatever you want. And if you're 0-12, it doesn't matter if they like you or not, because they're going to get rid of you. And I was like, yeah, but what if you're 8-4? And I do think then it kind of matters. And people really like Mike Norvell as a person, but when you're this bad, that all goes out the window. So, there's not a lot of people in his corner right now. He's going to have to, I believe he's going to make some significant changes and just show something next year. You don't have to be back into the championship hunt next year, but it's got to be something like over 500, going back to a bowl game, looking like a competent football team, because if he has another season like this, I don't know if it'll matter how much they owe him, because it's just, it's been a disaster.
Lesson in here for athletic directors who rush to extend contracts for big dollars. You might want to just take your time and, let things go for a few years and make sure you really have what you have. But anyway, Ira, thank you so much for your time today. Great insight into Florida State. We're looking forward to hosting you guys Saturday night. Florida State was a little rough on Miami a couple years ago. No, let's be honest. It was a pretty big, brutal beatdown, and I'm sure Miami feels like they owe them one. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens Saturday at Hard Rock Stadium, whether Florida State can rise to the occasion a little bit and challenge Miami on the national stage. For Ira Schoffel, I'm Gary Ferman. Thanks for joining us, everybody. We'll see you next time.